My little itty-bitty bruiser buddies.
United States heavyweight champion from Brazil.
The world's heavyweight champion from the AWA, Nick Bockwinkel.
The Midwest supporting, bruiser loving, positivity spreading, world's most dangerous podcast. Join former pro wrestler and promoter Dave Dynasty as he supports and promotes Midwest pro wrestling. Keep on growing with the Midwest Express. This is the Dave Dynasty Show.
And welcome to the Dave Dynasty Show. This is your host, Dave Dynasty, a.k.a. Delicious Dave, Downtown Dave, the blind boy of Indiana, Dynasty Dave, the mouth of the Midwest, Mr. Midwest. You can call me whatever you like. I've had a multitude of nicknames in my day, and that's okay. That's good. Always changing, always evolving. Thank you for joining us on this episode. This is a great episode we have with you today, as we are being joined today by the one and only Spirit of America, Chris Carter. A very, very rare podcast appearance for Chris. Matter of fact, it might be his only one. I'm not 100% sure. I have not found another appearance he did, but it could be out there. I'm not sure, but I know he's not done many. And we have a great interview with him today that I did. And we have a Whatever Happened to Dr. Love. We are paging Dr. Love. For those of you familiar with Central Indiana Wrestling, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, around in that era, you will know Dr. Love. I worked many shows with the good doctor back in that day. And speaking of doctors, remember, we still have the Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. shirts that we have brought to you on Pro Wrestling Tees, partnering with the good doctor himself, Mr. Jerry Graham Jr. Those are selling very well, and you need to get one. You cannot be like the most highly educated man in pro wrestling, but you sure can dress like him if you get a Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. shirt. So make sure you order that. Go to ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty and get one of those shirts, or possibly get a Dave Dynasty Show logo shirt or a Midwest Express shirt, or make me a very, very happy guy and buy one of each. I would love you forever. Okay, I love you more than I already do. I love you all anyway. I'm that kind of guy. I'm a positive, love-spreading kind of guy, and now I just totally sound like a slut, but that's okay. Thank you again for joining us in this great episode. A few reminders, a little bit of business to take care of. Remember, the Dave Dynasty Show will be at Heroes and Legends 11 on Saturday, October 27th in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You do not want to miss this show. Lots of great stars from pro wrestling's past and present will be there, including us, as we will have a table there doing some recording, doing some live broadcasting via Facebook, etc. Come say hi, have a picture, get an autograph, chat it up with us. Me and Ike will be there. It'll be lots of fun. So make sure you stop by, say hi, give us some feedback. We always appreciate that. Some big news here in the world of the Dave Dynasty Show. Next week. No. I'm sorry. Actually, I would guess it would begin this week. I totally confused on what day of the week it is that I'm recording and the release and so on and so forth. So this week, as this episode is released and you are listening to it, the Dave Dynasty Show will be partnering with Pod Avenue. That's right, the home of Jerry Lawler's Dinner with the King and Jerry Jarrett's Booking Memphis Wrestling podcast. You will see banners for the Dave Dynasty Show on the websites and the pages at Pod Avenue, and you will hear our podcast mentioned during Lawler's show. We are very excited about this. I'm a huge fan of Pod Avenue's work and of Lawler's podcast and Jarrett's podcast. I'm a huge Memphis wrestling fan. And it is very exciting and very much an honor for us to be partnering with them and to hear us mentioned and advertised on their shows, to see us on their websites. Great partnership that we've got going on there, and I'm very excited. Speaking of Jerry Jarrett, so on social media, I did say that we have the 100th episode coming up here in 2 weeks, 2 episodes. And we have some very cool things that are going on that. And I did mention that I have recorded a very good segment for that show and that I would reveal it on this episode. So, yes, speaking of Jerry Jarrett, that is the guest. He will be appearing on our 100th episode in 2 weeks. And everybody will ask, well, why Jerry Jarrett, right? Jerry Jarrett's Memphis Wrestling, Southern Wrestling. What's that got to do with the Midwest? Because if you want to hear about Jerry in Memphis and his work there promoting, you could read his book, or you can listen to his weekly podcast from Pod Avenue. I purely talked with Jerry Jarrett about his time and his association with Dick the Bruiser. That's right, all the way back to when Jerry started running Louisville, which was then, quote-unquote, a Bruiser Snydertown, all the way up through when Jerry brought in Bruiser to Memphis to work against Jerry Lawler, and, of course, in that early 80s partnership that they ran here in Indiana, or here in the Midwest, with Bruiser and Jerry running together, partnering up. That's all we talked about. We just talked about that association, and it's a very cool chat. To me, it's a very significant piece of history, very interesting piece of Midwest wrestling history that you don't hear very often. So we talked to him about that and get his side of it. What happened? How did it develop? How did it fall apart? Etc., etc. So that will be on the 100th episode. We will have some other guests on that show, some other fun things that Ike and I are working on. It's a kind of a big deal, right? 100 episodes. Who would have thunk it? But here we are. So, again, that is in 2 weeks. Next week, we have some cool guests, too. Hopefully I don't jinx this. I don't like to mention names until they're recorded. We've not quite recorded these yet. They will be recorded tomorrow. But next week's guest will be Flash Flanagan and a Whatever Happened To with Trailer Park Trash. That's right. It has a very, very distinct Ohio Valley wrestling flavor there. Former tag team partners, their Flash Flanagan, Trailer Park Trash. That'll be a great episode. And then that'll be it. That'll lead us right to the 100th episode and lots of good things. But before we get to any of that, right, we got to get through this episode. We're just starting here today. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will have the man of the hour, the spirit of America, Mr. Chris Carter. So stick around. You've heard him here on the Dave Dynasty Show as a guest and as host of the monthly Graham's Gallery episodes. And now you can hear his stories. You can own a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler, the audio book from Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., former multi-tag team champion in WWA and owner of Bruiser Bedlam. You can hear all of his encounters with the various wrestlers, places, and promotions he's worked as he tells about his colorful, long, and illustrious career. You can have your own copy for only $25, and that includes shipping and handling. It's very simple. Go on Facebook, look up Jerry Jaffe, Jaffe, send him a private message, and make arrangements to purchase a copy of Confessions of a Big-Time Wrestler now. You will not regret this purchase. And we're back on the Dave Dynasty Show with a very special guest, Midwest legend, the spirit of America, Chris Carter. Sir, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about you, David?
I'm doing very, very good. So we're going to jump right into it. And let's start off. Let's get a little background about you, if we could, sir, for those not familiar with you. Tell us where you're from.
I was born and raised in Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. Started my wrestling career right there, too, man. And my first match was in Allen Park, Michigan on the 6th of December, 1978. Wrestled for the original Sheik.
The original, yeah. We'll get to the Sheik. We're going to talk all about him. So tell us,
okay, cool.
tell us what your childhood was like. Did you play sports? Did you anything going on?
Oh
up there?
yeah, I played sports. I loved baseball, loved football. Played some basketball.
Yeah.
I remember, man, when I was 5 years old, I was home with the chicken pox. Okay, so on Thursday night, 10 o'clock, Channel 9 from Windsor, Ontario, had wrestling.
Okay.
So I'm 5 years old. I get to stay up. I'm watching a wrestling show. I see Louis Klein give a guy an atomic drop and pin him, and I'm hooked on it ever since.
Yeah. So that's your first memory of wrestling. Then 5 years old when you're sick watching.
And I remember the next night I wanted to watch it again. I was crying like a baby because it wasn't on. It's only on once a week.
Yeah. So when as you're watching wrestling, when did you know that, hey, I want to do this? This is something that I want to get into, that I want to make my life.
Probably that night. I would say probably, in my late teens, early 20s, I said, man, I got to go for it.
And as you're watching as a child, so who are some of your favorites you're watching there in that area?
Well, of course, Louis Klein, Bobo Brazil, the Sheik, Tex McKenzie, Pompero Firpo, all kinds of guys.
Yeah, those are some great names. So when did
Lord Ethel Layton? He was one of the best commentators.
Oh, yeah.
that I ever seen in my life, man.
Yeah, when I talked to Terry Sullivan, he talked about a lot about Leighton, how that was his big influence, and how that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be Lord Leighton. That's what he.
Terry Sullivan, that's my buddy, man, for the last 40 years.
Yeah. So, when do you remember when you first saw your first live match or your first live show?
Man, my first live match, I would say, I believe it was 1966, and I think I was about 12 going on 13. And me and a buddy lied to our parents and say, I'm staying over his house. He said he's staying over my house. We hopped on a bus, man, and went downtown to Cobo Hall to see our first wrestling match, man. We paid $2 for a ticket and was up in the stratosphere. But I remember Danny Hodge was on that card. Of course, the Sheik, Tex McKenzie. It was absolutely unbelievable, man. And it was just packed with stars. I'll never forget that, man. When we're in Cobo Arena, and all the lights go off, and the big ring light went on, and that was it, man. I was mesmerized for the next 2.5 hours.
Absolutely. So later on, when did you start training? You trained with Al Costello, is that right?
I originally trained with Al Costello. Yep, the Fabulous Kangaroos, actually the originator of the Fabulous Kangaroos.
Absolutely,
I started training with him in, I guess, latter part of '76.
Yeah. So how did you make that connection? How did you get your foot in the door? I know it was a very protected business at that time. So how did you make that connection?
I'll tell you, man. I tried. There was another guy that was on TV, George Cannon.
Right. Absolutely.
He had a show, The Superstars of Wrestling, and he always advertised, if you want to be a wrestler, blah, 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 send in and we'll give you all the information. Well, I tried sending in to him for months, and finally he called me back and said, hey, you're in the Detroit area. Al Costello's in the Detroit area. I'm going to give Al your number. I said, okay, cool. So Al called me, and, Al was pretty much retired from wrestling then. He was doing some security work and stuff, and he had a small gym, and he trained a few guys.
Yeah. So when did you make your debut?
That was the 12/6/78.
Okay. And who was that working for?
I was working for the Sheik then.
Okay. So you debuted with the Sheik. So were you known just as Chris Carter, or what? I mean, were you just working at some underneath stuff, or how was that working?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was Chris Carter. I was just a beginner, a neophyte. It was funny, man. Yeah, I'll tell you, the best part of that whole night for me was this. I go to the arena. Of course, Al Costello's there, and he introduces me to the Sheik, and I'm watching the Sheik wrestle for the last how many years, know, and he's the Sheik, right?
Yeah.
The Sheik, I mean, he never spoke, never said anything.
Yeah.
So Al Costello said, hey, this is Chris Carter. Chris, this is the Sheik. The Sheik looks at me and goes, remember one thing, kid. I got the pencil. He said, I'm the boss.
Yeah. So what'd you think?
And I'm like, wow, he speaks.
Yeah, that's what Terry Sullivan said when he first heard him talk. He couldn't believe it. It just blew him away.
It was hysterical, man. And I mean, the guy, honest to God, man, he was a World War II veteran. He was unbelievable, man. I mean, but he was, at his peak of his career. I mean, the expression was the wrestler you love to hate.
Yep, right. So tell us a little more about what it's like working with you, because like when I talked to Terry and I've talked to some others, they talked about how he was so loyal to the guys that worked for him. As long as you were good to him and loyal to him, he was loyal right back. So what was it like working as a young kid, working for the Sheik?
Oh, well, first off, I was in awe of him, but he was a great guy. I mean, me and him hit it off pretty good, so he tried to talk to me and give me some of what he learned over the years that he was in the business, and tried to help me along and nurture me along a little bit, and get me going on the business and everything. And it was a great experience, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So how long did you work for the Sheik up there, on and off?
I mean, probably a year or so.
Okay. So tell us.
He was getting near the end of everything.
Yeah.
He was in Cobo Hall in downtown Detroit, selling out the place, 12,000 people every 2 weeks for years.
Yeah.
And it's sad because it's a hard business, and he just couldn't relinquish that top spot.
Yeah.
So he kind of sheiked everything to death, and he ended up in a smaller arena in Allen Park and a couple other smaller places, and then he was just gone. He was done.
Yeah, that's
he didn't have it in him to bring in a bunch of other younger talent and keep everything going. He wanted to be the center of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's
and as we all know in life, nothing lasts forever.
Right. Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. They talk about the Sheik and also about Bruiser. Talk about how it kind of almost aged themselves out of the business because they couldn't kind of step aside and they lost that luster, that attraction, that they may have once had. And that was kind of the
true.
downfall.
And I worked for Bruiser for years too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was, it was a similar situation with him. It was, it's people refer to the business as like syphilis, okay? Because once it gets in your blood, it never gets out.
Yeah, that's
so. And those guys, they couldn't relinquish that spot either.
Yeah. So
it was hard.
Yeah. So let's talk about back. Okay. So you're working for Sheik, but then you worked a lot for George Cannon. So how'd you you talked about him and up there in the Superstars of Wrestling. So how did you get back working with George after making that initial contact with him?
Well, George and Al Costello were great friends at one time. In fact, George managed the Fabulous Kangaroos for a long time.
Right, absolutely.
Al wanted to get me in with George, and he wanted to, be in charge of me and my career. Mm-hmm. And George, he didn't like that,
Yeah.
He said, I want you to come to work, but, he said, it's either you by yourself or nothing.
Right. Okay.
So it came down to it, and I told Al, I says, I'm going to go work with George.
Yeah, and you had a lot of
Al was not too happy.
Yeah, well, you had a lot of success up there with George. Is that really where you kind of started getting your first exposure? I mean, you were like junior heavyweight champ up there, and getting a lot of TV time and stuff.
Well, the big thing with George was the TV time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he had TV all over Canada. He had TV in Detroit, and he was in Toledo. He was all over the place. So it was great. He got in there, and I got in there, with him, and he hooked me up with Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. as my manager.
Yep.
And man, one thing led to another, and off we went. Man.
Yep. That's what I was going to ask you about next. You and Dr. Jerry Graham obviously have this, huge history, a long history. So when did you first meet him in those days?
I met Jerry, and I would say it was probably 1981 through George, and Jerry became my manager, and we had we had a lot of success. I'll tell you what, man, we had serious heat. We had cheap heat.
Yep.
We had serious heat, man. Me and him. It was great. We wrestled all from Canada, from Windsor, all the way up to Newfoundland.
Yeah. I've watched some of those episodes, and you guys were great. You had this chemistry, Jerry doing the talking, and you butt in, and Jerry would tell you, let me speak for you, and let me do this. So it's almost like this. You had heat, but you had this almost a little tension between you going on, and it was just a great chemistry.
We always had a little bit of that, and that was kind of a natural thing. So it was really kind of cool. So It was like wrestling. Everybody knows what wrestling is at the show, but we had some real kind of chemistry and real little bit of heat between us now and then. So it was great. And Jerry was a fantastic talker, and he was a great, and he still is a great mind for the wrestling business. And I would get in the ring, and I would wrestle, So I was kind of like a wrestling heel. So, and that got even more heat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we would wrestle, then we would take shortcuts and do crazy stuff.
Yeah. So then you get in the 80s and you start working for Bruiser in Indianapolis. So how did you meet Bruiser, and what was it like when you first met him?
Through Jerry Graham.
Okay. So was
Jerry had worked with Dick for a good long while, and Dick and George got together with their TVs, and George had his TV in Canada. Dick had TV from Indianapolis all the way to Springfield, Missouri, and back all over the place, and Indiana, Ohio, and all that stuff. So back then, and even today, TV is huge, man. If you don't have TV, if you're just an indie wrestler and you're wrestling on the smaller shows, there's nowhere to go there because you're not going to get anywhere without TV. So those guys had TV, and it was great. My first meeting, I remember I told Jerry Graham, I said, this is crazy, man. We're going to meet Dick the Bruiser. He's living in a $500,000 home at the time. our first meeting in his garage.
Yeah.
And it was sit down, talk to him. He said, "Here's what we want to do." Blah blah blah. I said, "Okay, cool, I'm in."
Yeah, and like we said at that time, I mean, Bruiser was still booking a lot of those aging veterans that he'd used for 20 years. But then there was guys, there was guys like you and Jerry and even Calypso Jim and some of the younger guys that are slipping in there. And you guys had some success though, and I mean, kind of despite kind of the booking methods of Bruiser. So, I mean, how did that come to be that you guys kind of worked in there? I mean, was it just?
I guess that, I mean, realistically, it was kind of a good mix of the seasoned type veterans with some young blood and young legs underneath.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Dick was smart enough to mix us guys in with the older guys, and kind of, that was a very successful thing the way he did that. He had an ego, but he wasn't as big of an egomaniac as some of the other guys. Yeah. He was still interested in making money, and he knew how to draw a buck.
Right.
So Dick would he would have himself out of the limelight for a while, and get a big thing going. Then he would come in for the big blow off with people.
Yeah. So you worked for Bruiser and WWF through, and then it started the transition to the Bruiser Bedlam and moved over to Toledo. What was that like being on the inside as that transition was happening?
That was great, but I got to tell you this one story about Dick. It was hysterical, man. We're in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're having a cage match for a blow off with some guys, and so the guy setting up the ring does a crappy job setting the ring up, and a couple boards are out of place. Okay, so I get my foot caught in there, and I twist and I tear my knee.
Oh man,
I can't get up. I mean, I'm doing everything I can to get up. I'm looking at Dick. He's looking at me. He's got his hand out for the tag, and he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, Carter. We don't pay extra for that." And it's like, that has stuck with me for my whole life. I say it to everybody when anything ever happens at work or anything. Hey, we don't pay extra for that. So it was crazy, man. I'm out of wrestling for 6 weeks, with knee surgery, actually a little bit longer than that. And he could care less. So, it's, everyone for himself. It was just funny, though, the way he looked at it and did it. So,
yeah. So tell us then the transition to Bruiser Bell. What was that like from you on the inside and see it? I mean, Jerry kind of rising a little more there within the ranks and taking more of a lead. What was that like? Because obviously you and Jerry were very close.
Jerry was the actual one that was instrumental in getting Bruiser Bedlam off the ground.
Right.
Because he met a boxing promoter in Detroit, Bill Kazurski. Bill Kazurski had great connections with, what was his name? Fetzer, the guy who used to own the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, right.
And he started the Pass Sports Network.
Right.
And they were looking for programming. And Jerry got hooked up with Kazurski. We went over to Kazurski's office, had a few meetings and stuff. Kazurski said, well, Pass would be interested in doing a local TV show out of the Detroit area. But, they're looking for a big name in there. And Jerry said, well, I'll get you a big name. How's Dick the Bruiser sound?
Right.
And so they said, wow, man, you get Dick the Bruiser, we can do this, And he said, well, what do you call a show? And Jerry said, how about we call it Bruiser Bedlam? And we'll get Dick in to come in and be on the commentary and stuff, and then if something big happens somewhere, he'll come off the mic and we'll go from there. So that was the start of everything there.
I mean, I've heard that you were kind of very involved, especially in the Detroit area, with some of the shows up there and things, since that was kind of where you were from. Were you running some shows with Jerry and Bedlam?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we would refer to it as being in the office. So like I was in the office, there was me, Jerry, Bruiser, the Great Wojo, Bill Kazurski, and we would go out. Gary Warrenchak was another guy very influential. Would try to run spot shows and stuff. So we did a lot of stuff. So but being in the office, man, that makes you hated with the boys, because they, so it was crazy. So everybody hated us, but I didn't care because I loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I worked my butt off at it, man, for a long time. I mean, all over the place, up and down, man, booking arenas. And, we'd be going to the buildings. I'm helping the guys set up the ring, I'm setting chairs up. I'm doing everything I got to do the show, then wrestling.
Right. So it definitely breathed like a whole new life into the area with Bedlam. I mean, Bedlam was very successful. What was it like being on the inside, on the creative side? Because I've heard Jerry, Jerry was obviously he's got this great mind, was throwing out ideas, but I assume that, like you said, you and Wojo and all these guys were a lot of brainstorming going. So what was it like especially like at TV, creatively, writing this stuff?
It was like madness, man. I mean, we would sit down and we started long before we ever did a TV show, getting together and getting our storylines and what we want to do and trying to see who can do what and what we can do where. And it was like unbelievable, man. It was probably one of the hardest, most brutal things I ever did in my life. And then to be part of it as a talent too was absolutely unbelievable.
Right.
So it was just like a never ending thing. And then feeding it to get it going with money and everything else, So it's it was incredible.
Yeah. So one thing, when I think back on Bruiser Bedlam and I watch these old episodes, there's always the whole run of Bruiser Bedlam. I mean, to me, it all revolves around Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. and Chris Carter, and how, I mean, you guys with him as the heel and you as the face, and then him having the car wreck and it switching, you guys kind of flipping side. How did that just playing off that natural chemistry to you guys, did that go? And what was it like when you got back to that point where you turned back heel? Because you'd been a face there for quite a while.
It went great, but the biggest thing about wrestling, and I would have to say that Vince McMahon is the biggest genius in wrestling ever, and to be able to mix reality with the fantasy of wrestling,
right, that
creates success. So we were lucky with, I guess it wasn't lucky, but it was just happened that Jerry got in that car accident. That was a shoot,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And by mixing the reality with the fantasy, we were able to really bring something that was very popular and had an incredible run at it. Man.
Right.
It was just absolutely unbelievable, just by the mixture of the fantasy and reality. I think that's probably the only way you can say it, and that's probably the best thing you can do, and people don't realize that.
Yeah.
I think it still works today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, with Jerry having that car wreck, I mean, it made him a sympathetic figure. I mean, people can relate to that. Oh, he's been hurt in this car wreck. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy, and it was so cool how it naturally just built from that and went with it.
It was great, man. And he would come back when he came back and was able to do TV and stuff. We put him in a wheelchair, and I said, "Listen, man, here it's time for me to get on him." So we talked about it and said we put him in a wheelchair. I went out there with a cup with pencils in it. I threw some quarters in it. I said, "Here you go," and I pushed him off the stage.
Uh-huh.
And we had a big gimmick thing in the background to make a big crashing noise and everything when I pushed him in there, and that got over like $1 million.
Yeah,
man. That was absolutely unbelievable. We were selling out every place we were going after that.
Yeah, and also when I think back on Bedlam,
and then we also had a guy too, man, that we can't leave out was Sam Botek Jr.
Right.
in the Toledo area. He was the Miller beer distributor, man. Without him, I don't know where we would have got, because that guy, he opened up the vault for us to do all kinds of stuff, man,
absolutely,
for advertising and talent. And it was just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, we were so close at one time to getting $1 million contract for professional wrestling in the mid to late '80s from the Miller Brewing Company. People were freaking out all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. And I mean, Botek and that Miller Knight name was all over Bedlam in those days with that sponsorship. I mean,
man.
He was making appearances, and he made appearances. And again, one of the best parts of Bedlam to me were the Graham's Gallery segments. I watch those and I crack up just at the way Jerry is feeding off these guys and the things he's doing. And it's some of the times it's like the other guy just can't keep up with Jerry. And it's just so humorous a lot of times. What was it like being there and watching that stuff and watching Jerry in that element? And I mean, I don't know how you kept a straight face.
Jerry once again was a genius for wrestling, and he was probably one of the best talkers that I ever saw in my life. And he just had such a grasp on what was going on, and he was the most intelligent wrestler manager in history, and he did his homework on everything.
Yep.
When he talked about something, it was no joke. He knew what he was talking about, man, and I don't care who would be listening, they'd go, "Damn, that guy's right."
Yeah, right. So,
and there was nobody that could out-talk him.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And then the late '80s, so Bedlam closes up. and I've talked to Jerry before, and we've had him on the show. We do a monthly episode with Jerry, kind of do a Graham's Gallery thing on our podcast, and he talked about how
cool.
Yeah, how they were just, Bedlam was still going strong, but you could just kind of see the writing on the wall in the nationalization by the WWF, and it was just time to step away before it went under, before it got to be too much.
Yeah.
And so, what did you do when Bedlam closed up? Where did you go? What did you do from there?
Well, just after that, we just kind of wrestled on some indie shows and stuff, and then a friend of mine in the early '90s, Gary Warnshak, he started up Midwest Territorial Wrestling, MTW.
Yep, that's where I was going next. Tell us about that.
Oh man, that was unbelievable, man. We were based in Taylor, Michigan, but we went a lot of places. And Gary would bring incredible talent in there, man. I mean, we had Road Warrior Hawk, we had Cactus Jack, Marty Jannetty. We created Bruiser Bedlam the wrestler that went on to be very successful with Jimmy Cornette down
Smoky
south.
Mountain. Yep.
Man, I can't even think of half the guys he brought in there. The great Sabu, Terry Funk. He brought in Terry Funk and Sabu for a match, and that particular night there was probably 3,000 people stuffed into this arena, and I mean stuffed in there. And it was the only time in the history of that arena for any event that ever happened where they had to have the police come in to help people empty the parking lot.
Right.
And it took 45 minutes for everybody to get out of the parking lot. And that match, I mean, those guys tore the house down, man. That was the night that myself and Muhammad Jihad Saad, International Freedom Fighters, we got our belts back from Calypso Jim and Road Warrior Hawk. It was huge, man.
Yeah, so
absolutely huge.
Yeah, so let's talk about, just from what you talked about Sabu. What was it like when you met him? Knowing how you knew and worked for the Sheik, and this being the Sheik's nephew, did you guys click a little bit? Was there a connection there because you knew his uncle?
Well, I'll tell you what, Sabu, he was a nice guy. He was a very incredibly hard worker, but he was very much to himself.
Right, that's what I've heard.
So he wasn't somebody that was out there looking to make any friends or have any buddies in the business or anything. Right. He was out there looking to make money. He was out there looking to have the best matches he could have.
Yeah, right. So if you talked about holding tag titles with guys. You've held tag titles with so many different guys in so many different places and so many different promotions. If you look back, did you have a favorite partner to work with that stands out to you?
Well, I would say my favorite partner of all time was Muhammad Jihad Saad from Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, and we came up with the International Freedom Fighters, and he would dress me up in all, a keffiyeh for my head, and I'd wave the Lebanese flag, and he had the American flag, and man, I'll tell you what, all we did was step out from behind the curtain to go to the ring, and that was it. Yeah. People were throwing stuff at us and wanted to kill us. Yeah. It was absolutely unbelievable. It was great.
Yeah, especially when you're coming from...
And he was a great guy, man. He passed away about 15 years ago, and I still miss him.
Yeah.
He was probably my best friend I ever had in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
I still see his family. I know his family. I get along with them. It was unbelievable, man. We would go somewhere and we'd look at each other and say, okay, we're sharing a room tonight no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it was especially impactful because here you were, you were the spirit of America, and you were waving the American flag and all this and that, and then for you to turn the way you did, I mean, I think that made it all the more impactful. So,
well, the turning thing, everything has to be done at the right time, in order to have that impact. So that's a real talent in itself to know and see when something should happen. Yeah. And Jerry Graham had a lot of influence in that too. And he was, I said, man, we need to do this thing. And he goes, yeah, I think you're right, but we got to wait just a little bit longer. Yeah. And he said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. So I'm going to play a little name association with you. We've talked about several guys, but I have a few more names I want to throw out there, and you just kind of give your first reaction to these guys, maybe tell a story or however you want to do it. Let's talk about Bobo Brazil.
Bobo Brazil, man, what a great guy. I met Bobo in the early 80s. Bobo's career was kind of winding down, but he was a great guy, man. I picked his brain about so much stuff in the wrestling business. It was absolutely unbelievable, and I got along great with him. I traveled with him a little bit, and probably one of the most influential people, and taught me that in order to have any success in this business, you must respect it, and you must not take for granted where you are and who you are, and think that you deserve something. Yeah. You have to earn it, and you have to respect the business. So I got a lot of that from him.
Yeah, and it's amazing. You hear all these stories about how great a guy he was, and to think about, the barriers he had to break early in his career. It's remarkable.
Unbelievable, man. The
guy he
racial
was.
barriers, especially. Come on, man.
Yep.
It's just absolutely unbelievable. But he just went about his business, man. And he was a real professional.
Yep. Okay. How about Calypso Jim?
Calypso Jim, man. Oh God, that's my buddy, man. I tell you what, man. Me and Jim, we had such incredible matches. We were tag team partners, of course, and then I turned on him.
Yeah.
And then we had matches, and it's hysterical because we're in the middle of our match, and I'm going, look. He goes, yeah, no shit, I see it. Every guy from the locker room was sticking their head through the curtain watching us work. And I had some unbelievable matches with him, so solid and just so brutal. Is like, wow, man, people like, they beat the crap out of each other. And you know what? We did.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about...
yeah, he was a great guy. I saw him probably 3 years ago, and he's still out there wrestling.
Yep, sure is. Yeah, he's... actually, I wrestled a few years ago, and then I got a neck injury. It's been 15 years ago. And Bo was very... Well, Bo, I call him Bo because he's working as Bo Jr. now. And
oh, yeah.
And he was very big in my early career, helping me because I worked a lot of shows with him here in Indiana, and he was always one of those guys that would sit with me and critique me, give me feedback, and he's just a great guy to be around.
Great guy. A lot of people don't know how strong faith he had.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's what made him who he was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, how about Bulldog Don Kent?
Oh my God, Bulldog Don Kent! I love that guy, man. Don Kent was my buddy, man. He pulled me aside one time. He said, "Look, kid, let me tell you something. You couldn't crack an egg with a punch like that. He goes, I'm going to teach you how to throw a punch." I said, okay. So, I wrestled him. The first time I wrestled him, and he laid some forearms in on me. I'm like, excuse me, sir. Can you get your forearm out of my back? And then he got me on the side. He goes, look, here's what I want you to do. He goes, it's like throwing a baseball. Come on, man. He says, I know you played baseball, so you know how to throw a baseball. Man, he taught me how to throw a punch, and I'll tell you what, man, when I learned that from him, that was one of the most important things I ever learned in my career, and he was such a great guy, man. When my kids were very young and growing up, and we were traveling around, when we got into Detroit, he came over, he would stay at my house on the weekends and stuff, and he loved my kids, man. We had such a great relationship. He was one of the best guys you could ever meet in your life.
Yeah, I will always say some of the best tag team matches I've ever seen is Chris Carter and Calypso Jim against Don Kent and Jerry Graham Jr. Those matches were amazing. And,
Don Kent, man, he was funny too, man, because you'd be wrestling with him and he'd be like, lay it in, kid. I'm hitting him all I got. And he's going, lay it in. I said, I don't have anything left, sir.
So you talked, obviously you were trained by Al Costello, and Kent was one of the fabulous Kangaroos. Did you ever meet Kent way back early in your career when he was around with Al Costello and stuff? Yeah. Very, very early,
yeah. Yeah, we, in fact, I had a little bit of a falling out with Al and stuff. And Al was running some trying to do some fundraising and shows and stuff a long time ago. And Don Kent said to me, look, kid, here's what we're going to do. We're going to help Al out, and we're going to work on a couple of his shows, and you and me are going to work. And I said, well, okay. I said, Al can't stand me. He goes, don't worry about it. I got everything off the control. So we went there and worked, and I'll tell you what, man, people said those were the best matches they ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, now let's, how about the great Wojo?
Oh, great Wojo. Come on, man. Olympic wrestling champion. Great family, man. He was a great guy too, man, and tough as nails, man. I remember when Jerry said, "Here's what we're gonna do with Wojo. We're gonna challenge people out of the audience." I said, "Oh Jesus, here we go," And Wojo, man, he stretched a lot of people. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
he was very tough, very tough. He was so strong I mean, if he didn't want to move, you weren't moving him.
Yeah, right.
That's all there is to it.
I still think Great Wojo is one of the most unsung talents that's ever in wrestling. The talent he had, and I mean, obviously maybe he didn't get that national exposure of some of these other guys, but he was so talented, so great to watch.
He was the stiffest guy I ever worked with, I'll tell you that. When I got done wrestling with him, I knew I was in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely, I bet.
The problem was he didn't know it. Only I knew it.
Yeah. So, all right, and I got one more name here, and maybe everybody always has an entertaining story. You saw this guy early in his career there. What about Scott Steiner?
Well, Scott Steiner, man, he was a great kid, man. He came to work with us in Toledo, and he was just breaking in the business. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he had his first pro match with me.
Okay.
And he was just coming out of U of M. At that time, he was the third on the all-time win list with amateur wrestling at U of M, and he wanted to break into the business, And his brother Rick was already there, and he was all over the place, so he didn't have time to help break him in. He says, you got to find somebody that's gonna, get you some experience. So he got hooked up with Jerry, and Jerry brought him in, and we went to work with him and tried helping him and doing what we could for him. And he was always a great talent. There's a lot of guys that, it's hard for guys to make the transition from amateur to pros. Scott was pretty smooth at that.
Yeah.
Wojo had a little bit of a hard time, but he did okay. You really believed his matches. There was no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scott was a good kid, man. We traveled on the road and stuff, and he worked real hard, man. Then when he was ready, his brother said, "Come on," and off they went.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah, Jerry always said he was such a natural talent that he would show stuff. He said there was even a time where he thought he was lying about his experience because he was picking up stuff so quick.
Yeah, he was. He was very, very quick and very talented, very athletic. He was, was really something. Good kid, brought up in a good family in Bay City, Michigan, and stuff. And he really wanted it, and God bless him because he got it.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, you're still out there making appearances, still working here and there. I mean, what's it like still getting all you? I mean, you told me I think yesterday that you got a match coming up here in about a week. And so what's it like to still get in the ring?
I'm wrestling this Sunday, actually. And wrestling, I do tag team wrestling mostly now. And I wrestle with my partner, Big Chuck Wagon, man. He is a great guy, too. And he is so funny, man. and he does all the comedy, and I do all the wrestling.
Yeah, all right.
And it's funny, I'll be 65 this year, and I'm still getting out there and trying to do what I can do. I can't do everything that I once did, but I can still have a good match with people.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever miss the full time and being on the road and stuff? Or are you kind of at that point where you
absolutely. Absolutely. I do miss it, but I'll tell you what, my body couldn't take it anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
I'll wrestle Sunday. It'll be Thursday before I feel back to normal.
Yeah. So there got a lot of fans out there that always. I mean, we get asked a lot about you, and you were always on my list of guys I wanted to get on. And so, is there a way that fans can keep in touch with you? Do you have any social media or anything, or do you kind of keep all that to yourself?
No, I just kind of keep all that to myself. They can get in touch with me through you.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, we can do that. Yeah. So all they got to do is contact us.
You can pass it along to me. I had a lot of fun in the business, man. It's a funny thing. I had opportunities to do a lot of things. Okay, but I know that having children and being married was very important to me, and so I knew that I could not really leave and sell my soul for the business like a lot of other guys have done.
Right.
So I didn't have a lot of stories from New York and Charlotte and stuff because I tried to stay close by home.
Right.
But I got to do what I wanted to do, and I got to have my family and everything, and I'll be celebrating my 40th wedding anniversary this year in October. Okay. So to me, that's one of the crowning achievements of my life.
Absolutely.
And I got to do a lot of what I wanted to do, but I got to stay with my family because it killed me when I seen guys getting divorced, not seeing their kids and everything. And I refer to it as selling your soul for the business. And I just didn't want to do that. So I never did it.
Yep. Did your kids
did it the way I wanted to?
Absolutely. Did your kids ever show any interest in and stepping into the business, or is it just that?
Yeah, no, not really stepping into it, but they came to all the matches locally when they were younger and we were in the area and stuff. Yeah. And they would help my daughter one time. She was in Girl Scouts. And so we were wrestling in the MTW, and they were selling Girl Scout cookies. So we let them set up a table and sell Girl Scout cookies, and we sent some wrestlers out there to sign autographs while they sold the cookies. They sold a record amount of cookies.
I bet, yeah. So when people look back on your career, and when you look back on your career, what is it that jumps out the most for you, or you would like people to notice most overall from your career? Well,
that I gave it 100%. And I was truly dedicated to the business, and I respected the business. And I think that if people thought that or remembered that would make me happy.
Absolutely. Well, you definitely, on our side, on the fan side, you definitely entertained us. You were definitely great to watch, and I think that definitely came through in your work, and we all appreciate that a lot. And I think it's a kind of, with a lot of guys, it's a lost thing nowadays, is that true love for wrestling and that dedication and stuff. And
the business has changed so much over the years. You know, I remember Terry Funk winning the NWA championship with a vertical suplex.
Yeah.
That's not even a high spot anymore.
That's
you know,
right,
I mean, today, if you don't jump off the top of a skyscraper and do 20 flips and almost kill yourself, then, you know, you're not entertaining. It's I tell people, I said, the business has come a long way from when Strangler Lewis would lay in the middle of the ring with a guy in a headlock for 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
And the guy would give up.
Yeah.
You know, and people went nuts for that. And you look at it now, and it's like, oh, man, you can see why there's so many injuries.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
People are dying. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yep.
So it has definitely gone through a transformation.
Yep, sure has. So, well, thank you, sir, for coming on. We really, really, really appreciate it. Like I said, when I started this show, it's been almost 2 years I've been doing this now, and you were absolutely in my top 10 from the beginning that at some point I wanted to talk to you. So it's truly an honor to talk to you, and I appreciate you coming on and telling us some stories from your career and letting everybody take a look at it with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate it, man, and thank you for saying that. That's a very high compliment as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you what, man, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time. And
no problem.
It was a kick, man, and I'll be, like I said, I'll be out there wrestling this Sunday, man, so looking forward to that. You know, I'm going to be wrestling for International Big Time Wrestling.
Uh-huh.
That's run by the Rude Boy, you know.
Yep.
He was the ICP champion many times and stuff, and me and him go back a long time. I met him when he was 12 years old. And, you know, but he's still out there, and we're still good friends, and he does a heck of a job, man. And he's one of the only guys that I'll really work for. I have other people asking me, and if I don't feel comfortable doing something, I don't do it. But I'm comfortable, and I'm at home in an IBW ring.
Whatever happened to you?
And we're back with Whatever Happened To, the segment where we catch up on some often overlooked names from Midwest Wrestling's past. I am Mike Isaacs, and today we're chatting with Dr. Love. How are we doing today?
Good. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, Dr. Love. Well, we'll jump right into it. So tell us, Doctor, how did you get started in wrestling?
Well, it's kind of a strange story. I'd started doing my amateur wrestling and playing football since I was probably in third grade. So I was always active in sports. Not always the biggest guy, but I tend to be one of the faster guys, so I always the glory of carrying the football and getting my knees taken out constantly, which caught up to me at a later time when I did start doing the pro wrestling. But after high school, I did a little bit of mixed martial arts, a little bit of cage fighting. My was a really big wrestling fan, and she was glued to the TV watching the pro wrestling, and she'd done that for years. And as I was growing up, I remember many Saturday mornings sitting there with my grandma, and she would get all pumped up and excited and throw her popcorn in the air. And there was times where I thought maybe she was going to throw a body slam on me. But after I'd messed around with a little bit of mixed martial arts and what have you, she had approached me, again, of all people, about training to try to do some wrestling. And I thought, well, that's nothing that I'd ever considered. Sure, I like watching it, and it was. I'm not a very big guy. Me in the ring, these guys are going to kick my butt up there. But, hey, I'm all game. I was going to try it. She was going to pay for it. I thought, hey, we can only go downhill from here. So it was probably right about, I'd say, 1995. She got me. She actually had located the school. Internet wasn't the biggest thing then. I mean, it was around. You could dabble on it a little bit, but I think she had actually picked up the phone and called some libraries and was checking into training schools, and that's where she ran across in Cincinnati. I trained from Roger Ruffin. Chris Parks had a lot to do with my training, Abyss. He worked with me with a lot of my persona in the ring and different moves. But my training had all started from Roger himself.
Oh, wow. So, very cool. That is kind of a strange, I guess you could say, origin story. You know, but that's very interesting, though. So then, her love for wrestling kind of inspired your love for wrestling.
It did. Yep. Yeah, sure. And like I said, I always liked wrestling, but it was nothing that I ever considered. I've always been the smaller guy that's had to prove himself, and I felt like I could do that with the mixed martial arts. But when I was watching the wrestlers on TV, these guys, they're giants. I'm only 5'9", I'm thinking, man, I don't think I belong in there, but let's give it a shot. Like I say, Roger did a lot, and Chris helped me a lot. And I trained off of them for a couple years, and then I actually finished my training up just north of Fort Wayne, Indiana, by a guy who was by the bounty hunter, Jay. He finished my training up for me, and I trained with him for probably another year to a year and a half. After that, it was, I guess you can say, all downhill.
So, very, like I said, very, interesting, very good. A story kind of how you got into it. And then obviously you had some pretty good influence, like you said. You had a lot of good people to kind of back you up, build the foundation, and get you to where you needed to be.
Well, now, I had a lot of good people that included my whole fan base of my grandmother. Now, my parents, on the other hand, Mom always wants your kid to be the freaking attorney, or you got to be the doctor, or what have you. So she wasn't so much about it, but I thought, this is my opportunity to please both my grandmother, who was a great big wrestling fan, and my mother. So that's how I took on the whole Dr. Love persona. I was the doctor for my mother and the wrestler for my grandmother.
You're just like, I gotta figure out a way to please everybody.
Please them all, man. I actually gained a couple more fans. I had my mother and my father in my corner at that time.
That's good, though. What more can you ask for?
Right.
So, and after you got your training, after you kind of developed, obviously you got to work quite a few places. I'm sure you got to work with a lot of people. What were some of your favorite places to work and some of your favorite people to work with?
Oh, gosh. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people that came, from the WWE or WCW in the past. Nikolai Volkov. I've got to work with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Rikishi, King Kong Bundy, Trish Stratus. Funny thing about Trish Stratus, I was working a comic book convention show in Novi, Michigan, and this must have been probably about 1999. Like I say, I've been wrestling for about 4 years, but 4 years into a career, you're still kind of considered the green guy in the locker room. You're sitting in there, guys that have been doing this for 15, 20, 25 years. So even though I felt like I was moving along pretty well at the time, I was still what everybody else would call greenie. So anyway, we're doing this big comic book convention. You got all these main characters from Star Wars there. You've got the Dukes of Hazzard actors there. So, a lot of famous people, and they were doing a wrestling show for them. And this was actually set up through CIW Wrestling at the time, which was the Bounty Hunter. I'm sorry, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here with you. I'm listening.
Okay. My phone's beeping. Somebody trying to call in, so I don't know if I lost you.
No, you're good.
But anyway, I'll make a short story long here. No, so we get this good-looking girl. I mean, she's a knockout. She's with a couple other girls, and she's back in the locker room, and she's asking, hey, can I get up in the wrestling ring? I really want to do this. Let me do something for the show. And, of course, I'm sitting back there with my trainer and some other guys, Brian Costello, who works in the WWE. He's back there, Bobo Brazil. But, everybody's like, okay, no, nobody wanted to tell this girl no. Here it is, a pretty girl. For some reason, it comes back to good old Doc Love, and they're like, hey, this girl wants to train. What are you going to do? Or this girl wants to be in the ring. She's not been trained. What are you going to do? And I'm thinking to myself, why? I'm 4 years into my career. Why are you guys putting this on me? That guy, I got to tell her no. So they thought maybe I could do it a little more easier. His name is also Trish the Dish. She was my manager for years. I ended up marrying her. But anyway, so I go up to this Trish Stratus, this girl that's never been trained. I'm like, this is the way I was taught. You've never been trained. You don't belong in a wrestling ring. I'd sure like to give you the opportunity, but it just isn't going to happen. Our insurance company, they throw fits. So anyway, I'm the one that looks like the big dummy turning this girl down. And this was in '99, and probably 6 months later, in 2000, Trish Stratus walks into the WWE, hits it big on TV, and I'm the jackass that sat there and told her, no, you can't get in my wrestling ring. So that was one that was never forgotten, and it was probably 10 years after that. The producers for a TV show, Armed and Famous, which consisted of Trish Stratus and a lot of other actors, Poncho from Chips, Wee Man, Janet Jackson. They all came and invaded Muncie, and what they were is they were all sworn in as police officers, and they was going to go out in this whole TV segments where it's about them being cops, going out and busting the dirty side of Muncie and putting people in jail. So at the time, the TV producer had gotten a hold of me, and here I was, the local hero guy or not so hero, and they wanted me to run a wrestling show and put it together in 2 days. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't run a wrestling show, and I definitely can't give you a packed house in 2 days. So they're like, oh, no, it's going to be fun. You just tell them it's a free show. Let everybody come in. It'll be great for Armed and Famous TV tapings. I'm like, okay, cool. So they come at me and say, Trish Stratus, she wants to work in the ring. I'll be damned if she didn't show up. But still remember, they shall turn her down 10 years ago. So I got stuck in the ring with her, and Trish kicked my butt up and down. So
little bit
one of those moments that I was remembered for that wasn't my greatest moments. But it was still fun. She was very professional, awesome girl, a lot of fun working with her. I apologized to her that, I couldn't let her in the ring 10 years ago. I was kind of a greenie myself, and all that was being put on me to be the bad guy. So, but she went on to have her successful career, and I went on to look like the dummy that wouldn't give her a shot.
Right. Well, hey, so, like you said, sometimes things are out of your control, and,
Right.
But hey, at least it's a good story to have, right?
Right, I guess it's good. I don't know.
Oh, man. So, I mean, honestly, that's a hilarious story. I mean, I've never heard that story, but, like, I could definitely see that happening. And you said you wrestled up here in Muncie?
Yeah, yep. That's where I come from, was Muncie, Indiana. Like I say, I wrestled pretty well everywhere, many different states, many different towns, done lots of town fairs as well as state fairs. So there was a time where I was staying booked all the time, maybe a little too often, traveling hotel to hotel. Right. Before you actually hit it, halfway big in the independents, this is like something you think about, and you're like, oh, that's going to be exciting. I'm going to live like a rock star, go hotel to hotel, meet lots of different people. So at first, it's just the funnest thing in the world, I felt like I was some kind of royalty at some of these shows that I was going to. So I was staying booked all the time and lots of traveling. My wife stuck by my side the whole time, and about 2001 was when our first son was being born. I tried to slow down a little bit and didn't take quite as many bookings. I was always wanting my son, and I was getting him, so I was going to be home for it. So I kind of slowed down in 2001, but I did keep wrestling for another probably 10 years, just not as often.
I gotcha. So, you know, eventually, obviously, you know, you take a little bit of a break, you slow down a little bit, and then once you slow down a little bit, eventually that turns into, you know, I'm not going to do it anymore. So
every independent wrestler went through that.
Right. So when was it, or what was it that happened that, you know, kind of pushed that to happen, where you kind of slowed down completely on the in-ring action?
Yeah, well, like I said, my son being born, my firstborn, that slowed me down quite a bit. But I guess the beginning of the end was probably more like, I'd say 2012, 2013. As I said, I was never the biggest guy in all the years of me playing football. Always the guy running the ball and getting his knees taken out. So actually, when I even started my pro wrestling career, I had bad knees going into it, and they just seemed to get worse and worse every year. Had both knees replaced, had back surgery, had hip surgery, and a lot of this, I got beat up quite a bit playing football and what have you, but I'm telling you, these are ring bumps where everybody says, oh, this is a stage show, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it all. All I do is, hey, come and play in my game for a day, get in the ring, play for a day, see how you feel. So, like I say, I contribute my knee surgeries and my hip surgery a lot to the pro wrestling. So about 2012, 2013, after I had my second knee surgery, that's when I really started slowing it down to almost a turtle pace. I don't think all the independent wrestlers, pro wrestlers, they say, hey, I'm done, I'm retiring. You know, I was there too, and then I had other wrestlers come up to me and say, look, you still got a lot to offer to the business. Yeah, maybe you can't be as active in the ring as what you once were or what you'd like to be, but you could still do something for the business. And that's when I started gearing myself more towards promoting. I would still do an in-ring appearance once in a while. I wasn't able to take the hits and bumps and bruises that I once did.
Absolutely. And obviously that transition into, you know, doing shows, and I believe you trained some guys for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, we had a training center. It was a really good training center. It had a lot of students go through. In fact, there's some guys out there on the scene right now that I train that are really good workers. You got guys like Mr. Smiley. You got Pitbull, Rodney Fulton, Psycho Cop. So there's quite a few wrestlers out there on the independent scenes right now that I did some training with or trained out there on the scene. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So my first match, other than a couple battle royals, another quick short story, other than a couple battle royals, so after I had a couple years of training under me, like I said, I was throwing in there for battle royals, which to me, hey, I was just starting out. It was great. I was just happy to be in the ring doing what I was supposed to do. So the first one that I ever worked, I'm sitting back there, nervous as can be, and, you know, everybody's kind of ribbing me, giving me a hard time. That's what they like to do with the green guys, the rookies. So a guy that I thought I could trust really well, Ray Orndorff, who pulls me to the side of the drill, figuring, just calm down, you're going to be fine. If you freeze up out there, you can always grab Bobo Brazil. He's great to work with in the Indies. He tries to help take care of the green guys. So I'm in there working this battle royal, taking my bumps. I thought, okay, it's time for old Doc Love to get a little offense. So I'm not really thinking of who's who, what's what. So I grab Bobo Brazil, and I'm working him in the corner a little bit. Dumbest thing I could have ever done. I draw back, and I give him a chop right across the chest. At that time, he's just kind of laughing. I'm like, hey, come on, settle this, man. I'm going to chop you again. So he lets me chop him again. I think I got 2 chops in. He turns me into the corner. I don't know if you've ever seen the hand on Bobo Brazil, but this thing, it's a King Kong hand. This thing comes collapsing down across my chest. I thought my sternum was sticking out of my back, and I'm like, oh, that hurts so bad. I'm thinking to myself, Ray Orndorff's telling me this guy's going to take care of me, and so Bo works me a little bit, and it's why not. Just a couple minutes later, he picks me up above his head, over the top battle roll. So he launches me, and I go 4 rows into the crowd. Bam, hits chairs. I thought, man, this is what this is all about. So I learned my lesson then that I just don't grab Bobo Brazil in a battle royal and chop him. That's just not a good for a career decision, you're smart not to.
You know, I've actually heard some stories about Bobo Brazil's chest chops. Some from Dave Dynasty even, and you know he say handprint for days. Just
Dave's been on the other end of them. He knows what they're about. Yeah.
Shoo.
So.
Well, hey, at least you made it out there in one piece, right?
Hey, that's what I thought. I got out there in one piece, and I might have came back to the dressing room in a couple different pieces, but in one hand, I was happy that I kind of survived out there. Man, this stuff's crazy. This is for the birds. So after working a couple battles royals, I finally got my which was against superstar TJ Power.
Okay.
TJ was really good to work with. TJ was one of the tighter workers, what we call stiff even. So he kind of gave me a couple of those shots and welcome to pro wrestling, young man. I took them. And the very same night, I worked another match. So 2 matches, and here again, I'm a rookie. I'm working 2 guys in one night. I'm wondering if I'm going to survive this. I also worked a guy by the name of Greg Lake the same night. So all in my first night of actually getting singles, I worked one guy that was really stiff and another guy that was a great technical wrestler. So that's when I decided I'd rather work.
Or go ahead.
Huh?
No, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. But that's when I decided I'd rather work a technical match with a Greg Lake than I would a stiff match with a TJ Powers.
I was going to say, I've heard both those names before. I believe we've talked to them both, I think. But yeah. I've heard.
I think they've gotten the old school guys around, and some of them are still going. I mean, all the power to them, and they can still do this. But I think they got into the business right about the time where these old school guys, they would still light you up pretty good in the ring.
No, yeah, absolutely.
From what I see, they work a lot different, not nearly as stiff as what we used to.
No, absolutely. And that's actually kind of another good question is that, you having been trained in professional wrestling in the 90s, that was kind of a unique time for wrestling. That was, the Attitude Era, and that was everything else. So you kind of saw a transition in wrestling from that.
I did, style. Big time. Yes.
And then having you, like you said, you did some training as well, so you kind of seen the newer style too, and then the recent decade. So, what are your opinions on this new style of wrestling?
I like the high flying style, fast pace. I like it, but honestly, I think at the end of the day, everybody likes a good old kick and punch brawl fight. Right. Even with some of the guys that I've trained or that went through my training center that wanted to become pro wrestlers, it's funny because, I was trained in the Attitude Era, and like I said, a lot of real guys there. But a lot of these guys that were coming into my school, hey, I learned this on a video game that I played, and I really want to try it. As soon as they told me that, I was like, wrong answer. I'll be darned if you're going to do some move on a video game and come into my school and think you're going to use one of my students as a guinea pig. So that's something that I have seen with the new age wrestling is a lot of people that haven't been fully trained, they might be watching Monday Night Raw and thinking they can do it, or playing the video games, whatever WWE video games or what have you they play. They find stuff on these games and they think that they can do that. So everybody wants to come in and do the crazy stuff. And that's just not the way I was trained or the way I'm going to train anybody.
Right. Yeah, I think if someone came to me and was like, hey, I want to do this move I saw in a video game, I'd be like,
yeah.
I ain't about that.
You better go on back and play your video game soon, because that ain't going to happen out here. So.
Right. Oh, man. So,
but yeah, during the Attitude Era, I mean, maybe I got into it just right time. I mean, I had the whole, I guess what you say, the Stone Cold look. I had the bald head, the goatee, so it was really easy for me to get over with the crowd. I mean, call it a cheap, easy way, if you will. But I didn't have to do a whole lot to go out there and please the crowd. So I was liking it. Everybody's in your corner, everybody's giving you the high fives. It's really cool. But then, of all places, we have a show in Muncie, Indiana, and I'm with my trainer, Jay, who's running the show, a CIW show. And Shadow, which is also another Muncie hometown hero, he's booked on the show. So we're both over. We got a packed arena. I mean, when I say packed for the Indies, 500 people was packed for an indie show.
Right.
And we had every bit of it. And they're crazy about Shadow. They're crazy about Dr. Love. These are the two hometown boys. So, I work my match. Shadow works his match. And Shadow comes out to do a small stint in another match. I come out to save Shadow. And of all places, my promoter makes me turn on Shadow in our hometown. So, we're out there, and I'm coming to Shadow's aid and helping him. He's going to shake my hand. There comes a dirty clothesline from Dr. Love that flattens him. Next thing I know, I've got it was at a bingo hall. So they're serving beer. I've got beer cans flying at me, hit me in the forehead, what have you. I'm like, these people just love me. It wasn't even 10 seconds ago they loved me and couldn't get enough of me. They want to kill me now. And it was strange because, again, like I say, Shadow knew a lot of people around here and was getting threatening phone calls. They was calling Shadow. There was a biker gang that came to it. They were calling Shadow. Hey, you want us to take Doc Love out? We could do something about this. He shouldn't have done that. So Shadow's passing word on to me, and my wife gets wind of it. She's like, you're done wrestling. There ain't going to be no more of that. We're getting phone calls at our house, how my number got out there. People leaving messages on the answering machine. My wife's like, you are so done with this. I'm loving it. I'm like, wow, man, I went from being a really good guy to the most hated guy around. And at that point, I had to be a bad guy from there out.
Right.
So Shadow and I went on to feud, not only just in the Muncie area, but promoters were booking us. We had a really good show, really good matches that we put together, and it really made for a lot of bookings for both of us.
No,
and the baby faces, the good guys, they're over big, but I'm telling you, they can't do it without a really good heel. It takes a bad guy to make the match.
No, absolutely. And actually, I don't remember who it was I was talking to the other day, but we were talking about how, when it comes to the two sides, babyface, heel, it's easy. It's kind of hard to get people to like you, but it's easier to get them to like you if you have someone that they hate more.
Right. Well, and like I said, I never really had a problem with getting them like me. Maybe it was timing or what have you, the bald head, the look, the goatee. So I never really had a problem. I just knew it was a heck of a lot funner having them not like me. So that's when my mind was made up that, hey, I don't care about these people anymore. I want them to not like me. I'm having fun with this. A little bit more dangerous in their hometown, but it was still good times.
Absolutely. So, kind of another, I guess, portion that we like to kind of look at is, obviously we've talked a lot about wrestling, talked a lot about, your career with training people and promoting as well. But obviously, once you stop wrestling, and you kind of move on to different things, you have to make a living somehow. So, what are you up to currently? What did you do after wrestling?
Well, like I said, I don't know that anybody's totally out of wrestling. Even when they do say they retire, I'm not nearly as active as what I want. To see me up in the ring doing anything just isn't going to happen these days. But I have still been known to promote some shows now and then. Just recently ran one with Boogeyman and Abyss on it. So I'm bringing in some of the bigger name talents and drawing a really good crowd. I've still got people that are contacting me about doing some training, not only just out of the Muncie area, but different places in the state. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I've got a real estate business where I'm flipping homes. I've been doing this, or even when I was staying active wrestling, I dabbled around with real estate a little bit, but it's become a really successful thing for me. And I don't have very much time to commit to wrestling. I miss it. I love it. And I'm not done training people. It's just a matter of when my schedule allows me to do that.
Right. So obviously still doing the wrestling that's another thing too. I've talked to a lot of people who, say like, oh yeah, I'm no longer active in ring. You never really, I think you never really, wrestling never leaves you. It's kind of like one of those things that kind of sticks around for forever.
It gets in your blood, and I think it stays there. I mean, I had a tag partner, and we had some success as the San Francisco Sex Symbols. It was myself and Quicksilver, and we did a lot of tagging together, went out there and wrestled with a lot of people. And Quicksilver kind of went through the same thing where he had some medical issues to where he just couldn't continue in the ring, and he was going to be retired, what have you. But, it's funny because once in a while I'll still run a show, and here comes Quicksilver walking through the doors just to hang. He's got a son now that's playing around with the pro wrestling a little bit, and Quicksilver's there for his shows, trying to help him and what have you. So let's say, even though we claim we're retired, one way or another, all wrestlers still have it in their blood and find some way to be associated with it.
No, absolutely. And I think that there'll always be some way to be associated with it. I don't think that there's ever, you don't have to wrestle to be pro wrestling, which is a very strong belief.
and that's what I say, at the time when I thought I was retiring, that's the whole thing. Well, I can't get in the ring and I can't do what I used to do. And that's when I had people that had been in the business for some time saying, look, yeah, maybe you can't get in the ring or you're not capable of doing it anymore, but you still have a lot that you can offer to other students and to the fans still. So that's when I started doing some promoting and putting shows on and start training people.
No, absolutely. So, and then outside of wrestling, obviously there has to be something that occupies your time. What do you do outside of the promoting and everything else that you do?
Well, like I say, right now, I'm really successful or really busy flipping homes.
Okay.
Been doing that for several years, and then I'm also I've got a son that is a junior that's a very good amateur wrestler. We should be seeing him on the state scene this coming season. So I'm helping a couple local high schools here, doing some coaching for them and working a little bit of one-on-one with some of the wrestlers, and just trying to get them to the big dance. The state show week here.
No, absolutely.
So
keep yourself busy, no doubt. So
3 kids, a wife, and lots of rental properties. So, like I say, I haven't slowed down any. Just not as busy with wrestling as what I once was.
Right. Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. You're still keeping busy everywhere else. So
Right. Yeah.
So as we kind of, wind down a little bit, obviously we live in a great age of social media. Not sure if you have anything, but do you have like a Facebook, Twitter, anything like that fans can follow you at if they want to catch up with you?
Well, there's a couple sites. One is a good old Facebook page, which is just under the name of Rusty Love. I still find fans that, surprising after so many years, they haven't forgot about me. And they still text me, send me messages. Hey, I remember some of these fans out here remember matches better than what I remember them. But other than that, we've also got a Facebook page, and it's International Pro Wrestling. Lots of fans stay in contact there. It tells a little bit about what some of the wrestlers are doing that have went through the training center. Tells a little bit about what I'm doing. Also let you know if upcoming IPW is pretty going.
Oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
with you.
Sorry, I thought we lost you there for a second. But no, absolutely. So we do have a couple of, ways that you guys can catch up with them if you want to. Like you said, Rusty Love, or the other page as well. But hey, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Love, for coming on here and, taking the time to, talk to us, tell us a lot of stories. We love stories. But I want to thank you very much. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And, folks out there, like we said, he's got some social medias. Go check him out. And of course, always support independent wrestling. It's the lifeblood of wrestling, as I say. But thank you again, Rusty. I want to thank you again so much. It's, like I said, an honor and a pleasure. But I'll always stay safe out there, and, hopefully we'll catch up with you again here sometime soon.
Hey, that'd be good. That sounds excellent. I appreciate your time, and everybody go out there and support Dave Dynasty Show, and you guys do an excellent job for the Indies.
No, absolutely. Well, we appreciate that. We try. But, well, all right. Well, hey, like I said, stay safe out there. Have fun flipping some more houses. I know that's not easy work. Oh, God.
Right. I deal with a whole entirely different breed of people with some of my rental properties. Wrestling fans are one breed of people, but they're all so nice even when they don't like you in comparison to some of the
Good Lord. You know, and there's just some nasty people out there, so I can't even imagine.
You're right. Takes all time, doesn't it?
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other, and we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on the Podcast Radio Network and Apple Podcasts.
And over a dozen of your favorite streaming and podcasting options.
And we're back on the Dave Dynasty Show. Special thanks to Chris Carter and Dr. Love for coming on today. It's impossible not to say that like that, right? If you say Dr. Love, you have to say it a certain way. It just naturally occurs. I don't care. Try that. Special thanks to those two for coming on the show today. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support the Dave Dynasty Show, help keep us free, help keep us churning them out every week, you can go to paypal.me/TheDaveDynasty and make a one-time contribution to the show, or you can go to patreon.me/TheDaveDynasty and make an ongoing monthly contribution. Anything you give helps, and we certainly appreciate it. Or you can go to ProWrestlingTees.com/TheDaveDynasty, buy yourself a shirt, help us out there. Remember, if you go to Amazon.com or HighSpots.com to shop, please first visit DaveDynasty.com, click on the links. It costs you no additional money. We get some referral feedback. Some financial feedback, some kickback on you shopping. Again, it costs you no more, and we appreciate that too. Any way you can help, we do appreciate. However you listen to us, please make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe. Send us comments, send us feedback. We love that. Go to DaveDynasty.com for all of our social media links. And that's it. That is the end of it for this week. We are almost there. One more episode to get out, and then we'll be at the 100th episode. Very, very cool. Remember, next week we will have Flash Flanagan and Trailer Park Trash on. Should be a great, great show. Thank you once again for listening. Thank you once again for sharing. Thank you for once again being a part of the Midwest Express and keeping that positivity flowing. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.